Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you. I'm Lorna and we are reading The Mystery of the Smuggler's Wreck by Helen Moss. And this is chapter 19, Into the Crypt. As soon as the panel closed behind him, Jack had second thoughts. He was inside a crypt. Crypts were full of dead bodies. He tried to push the panel open again. He'd rather climb back out and take his chances with Holworthy's boot, but the panel wouldn't move. It was stuck fast. Jack just had time to glimpse a shelf full of grinning skulls before his bike light flickered and went out. The battery was dead, like everything else in here. He banged his fists on the wall. He screamed for help. Nothing happened. He was buried alive. Jack sank to the ground. The darkness was so black it was suffocating. He tried closing his eyes and then opening them. It made no difference. He was afraid to move in case he bumped into those skulls or something even worse. He was freezing cold, and he didn't even have any emergency jelly beans left. And now he was starting to hallucinate. The shadowy figure he'd seen in the chapel doorway kept flashing into his mind as if it were trying to tell him something. He realised that the figure hadn't been beefy like Holworthy at all, but tall and gangly. More like Theo Jarvis, in fact, but why would Theo be in the chapel? And just when Jack thought things couldn't get any worse, he felt something tickling his knee. Spider. Then he heard claws scratching on the stone floor. Rats. And then he felt something nuzzle his hand. Rats don't nuzzle, he thought, nor do spiders. Drift, Jack sobbed, burying his face in Drift's warm fur, inhaling the comforting smell of damp dog. It's you! Drift licked Jack's nose. He had no idea what Jack was up to, but when he'd seen him creep out of the big house and set off into the woods all alone, he thought he'd better keep an eye on him. Emily had left him on lookout duty, as dogs weren't allowed inside the manor. Jack was a great young pup, but he was a lot like a Labrador, obsessed with food, full of enthusiasm, and always getting into trouble. He was Drift's favourite human after Emily, of course, but when it came to thinking things through, Jack could be 2 biscuits short of a full bowl at times. So Drift had followed him through the woods to keep an eye on him. It was more fun than sitting outside the manor waiting for Emily too. He kept his distance just in case Jack was in some kind of undercover stealth mission, and followed him into the old building. He suspected that crawling into this big stone box was not one of Jack's better ideas, but he'd slipped in behind him anyway. Drift lifted his nose and sniffed. On top of the delectable, earthy, ratty, bony smells, he could detect a trace of fresh air coming in from somewhere. Just as he thought, there was a tunnel leading off from the other side of this underground space. Of course, he was going to have to herd Jack along. Jack's light seemed to have disappeared, and it was well known that humans couldn't see in the dark. And as for following scents, no chance. Their noses were about as much use as a cat's tail. Drift nudged Jack's hand, then trotted a little way along the tunnel, barked softly, and waited for him to follow. Jack struggled to his feet, banged his head on the roof, ducked, and shuffled blindly in the direction of Drift's bark. Eventually, Drift came to a dead end. Oddly, he was now picking up human food smells rather than fresh air, but there was a round metal door set into the wall with what looked like some kind of handle. He nudged Jack. One thing humans were good at was handles. The sliver of light leaking in round the edge of the door was just bright enough for Jack to make out a bolt. He gave it a shove. It was very stiff, but finally it shot back with a clang. Jack tugged on the handle and for the 3rd time in 2 days, opened a door into the unknown. This time, he found himself standing in a charred metal basket inside an enormous brick structure the size of a small room. It opened out into a vast area of white tile and stainless steel, bristling with racks of knives and strange devices with gleaming blades. He seemed to have stepped into the secret laboratory of an evil scientist. Then, he realised that one of the machines was a fancy cake mixer and another was a ham slicer. He was in the old Tudor fireplace in the kitchen of Pendragon Manor. Meanwhile, Scott and Emily were searching for Jack. Joe Gordon's talk was finally over. Mr. and Mrs. White had offered to give the friends and their bikes a lift back to Castle Key Village in their Land Rover. Typical, Scott muttered. Disappeared just when you need him. Maybe he's going to find Drift, Emily suggested, heading for the back door where she'd left him on lookout duty. They were halfway down the corridor when two figures shot out from the kitchen, swathed in cobwebs and smothered in dust and soot. Emily shrank back in shock. What happened to you two? Scott asked. You look like a pair of zombies. I've only just found the Pendragon Chapel, Jack blurted, and the family tomb, and a tunnel. Aunt Kate was right. The maze was a decoy. Emily stared at him, trying to make sense of the torrent of words. Did you find the smuggler's hoard? She demanded. Jack frowned, making white creases across his sooty forehead. Well, no, I don't know. Scott snorted. You found the tunnel, but you forgot to look for the treasure. Jack waved his lifeless bike light in Scott's face. It was dark down there. I could have walked past the mask of Tutankhamun and the crown jewels, and I wouldn't have noticed. If it hadn't been for Drift, I'd never have found my way out. He bent to give Drift a big hug. He's an awesome guide dog. Scott was about to point out just how idiotic it had been to enter a dark crypt in the first place when he remembered his shark deal again. Fair enough, he said. Good work. We'll come back tomorrow morning for a proper look. Jack blinked in surprise. Did Scott really just say good work? Then he remembered something else. Someone came into the chapel. I don't know whether he saw me, but he didn't follow me into the tunnel. I would have heard him. Emily was outraged. Holworthy, that thug. He's got his own hiding place. He's not getting his hands on our smuggler's hoard as well. Come on, let us get back down there now. Jack shook his head. That's the weird part. I thought it was Holworthy at first, but I'm pretty sure it was Theo Jarvis. Theo Jarvis? Scott echoed. Emily stared at Jack for a moment, then suddenly she grabbed him by the shoulders. Of course, Theo is the compass thief. We should have figured it out before. He works in a shop that hires diving kit. He's bound to know how to scuba dive, and the shop owns a jeep for transporting surfboards around. He could have driven back down to the pirate cove. Scott frowned at Emily. But how did he know about the compass? I didn't tell him about it when I hired my wetsuit. Then he slapped his forehead and groaned. Oh no, I think I've got it. The first day after the dive, we were having lunch outside Dottie's talking about the compass. Theo was outside the Castle Key cabin next door putting out the display racks. He must have overheard us. Jack rolled his eyes. Yeah, I remember that. You two didn't stop banging on and on and on about the compass for ages, and Emily was asking you all about exactly where it was in the wreck. Anyone listening would have got precise directions on how to find it. But why would Theo want to steal it? We'll worry about that later, Scott answered. If Theo's got the compass, he could work out the way into the tunnel any minute. That's right, Emily said, fishing in her bag for her torch. We've got to find the hoard first. Emily, Scott, Jack. The friends turned to see Mrs. White limping along the corridor leaning on her stick. Ah, there you are. We've loaded the bikes already. Time to go. Emily turned to Scott and Jack. First thing tomorrow morning, she whispered. Scott nodded reluctantly. The crack of dawn, Jack agreed. If not before, he added, glancing at Scott. He knew just how much his brother hated early mornings. Next morning, Jack led the way through the woods, or rather, Drift led the way, nose down, following last night's trail along the path. Jack walked alongside him, pretending he knew where he was going. Emily skipped along impatiently. Scott shuffled behind them like the walking dead. It was only 6:30 a.m. When they reached the chapel, Jack swept out his arm like an estate agent taking customers round a show home. Look, he said excitedly, it's got bats and everything. He ushered them over to Elizabeth's tomb. Must have been a bit spooky in here by yourself last night, Emily murmured. Jack shrugged. Nah, I wasn't bothered. Together they all gazed down at Elizabeth Pendragon's beautiful, peaceful face. Forever yours, Scott murmured, reading the words on the plaque. Cross my heart, Emily whispered, pointing at the cross. So how did you get the tomb to open, Scott asked Jack. Jack ran his fingers round the edge of the cross. Well, it was very complicated, he said. It took a lot of figuring out, of course, but eventually I cracked it. Is something meant to happen? Emily asked. Jack jabbed at the cross. Still, the side of the tomb didn't open. Scott sighed. You were making the whole thing up, weren't you? Jack tried again. closing his eyes and trying desperately to remember exactly how he'd opened the tomb last night. He gently traced the shape with his fingers. "It's moving," Emily cried, "the side's sliding back." "Leave it open a crack so we can get out again without having to go through the manor," Emily said, crawling into the tomb with drift. Scott and Jack switched on their torches and followed. "I think I preferred this place when I couldn't see," Jack mumbled, trying not to look at the row upon row of skulls and skeletons neatly lined up in racks against the walls. After walking for a few minutes, Scott noticed a tunnel off to the side. Maybe the hiding place is down here. He ducked and entered the smaller tunnel. Moments later, the tunnel opened out and the friends stared in wonder at piles of treasure. Everything was smothered in dust and cobwebs, but the richness of the contraband beneath still shone through. Huge wooden chests and barrels were stacked on top of each other. Piles of silks and lace spilled over heaps of silver goblets and platters and stacks of spices and tobacco. "Wow," Emily breathed. "I bet nobody has set eyes on this stuff for over 200 years. That's when they heard someone running into the tunnel towards them. "Oh no," Scott gasped. "Theo must have found his way in." Jack whipped round and came face to face with the new arrival. But it wasn't Theo Jarvis. Join me for chapter 20.